At 18 years old, he watched his mother's life ended in the dirt by their neighbors. He watched those neighbors, powerful, protected, use their influence to walk free, while a sham trial blamed her for the violence. The system failed him. So, he made a choice. He would not forget. He would not forgive. He would wait. He waited 22 years. He waited for the one day of the year they would all be home, celebrating their guards down, Chinese New Year. This is the story of a reckoning 2 decades in the making. It's the story of a man who sacrificed his entire life for one single, brutal purpose. The entire nation called him a hero. The law called him a monster. Who was right? This is one of the most compelling, heartbreaking, and shocking tales we have ever covered. You are not going to want to miss a single part of this. Before we begin, if you love deep, complex stories like this, please do me a huge favor. Hit that like button. It tells the algorithm you want more. And if you're not already, subscribe to the channel. You won't want to miss where this goes. Alright, let's begin. In the year 1994, Kailan Zhao was a quiet young man, an observer, living in the space between 2 families. His world was defined by 2 small homes and the worn dirt path that connected them. His family was the Zhao family. There was his mother, Maylin, a woman whose voice seemed to carry further than anyone else's, filled with a strength that was both her shield and her weapon. There was his father, Boone, a man of fewer words, his hands shaped by the soil, his nature one of quiet agreement and a desire for peace. And there was Kailan, who watched them both. The other family was the Wu family. They lived so close that Kailan could hear their arguments and their laughter as if they were in his own home. There was Old Man Wu, the patriarch, and his wife, and their 3 sons. For most of Kailan's life, the 2 houses had been as one. He had memories of his mother pressing a warm, covered bowl into Mrs. Wu's hands during a lean season. "You must take it," Maylin's voice would insist, leaving no room for refusal. "The harvest was kind to us, we share." And he had memories of Mr. Wu and his eldest son, Wu Dai, helping his own father mend a broken fence after a storm. "A good neighbor is a blessing," Bolan had murmured in gratitude, and Old Man Wu had nodded, his face stern but not unkind. The families relied on each other. Their lives were intertwined by the seasons, by the shared struggle of the earth, and by the simple, unspoken rules of their small world. Then the talk began. It was a new word that Kailan started to hear from the adults: contract. A government grain contract. It was not a word of farming, it was a word of money. It promised stability. It promised an end to the empty seasons and the lean times. It promised a life beyond mere survival. And there was only one. Both families needed it. Both families vied for it. The warmth that had defined the path between the 2 houses began to cool. Kailan watched his mother's face grow tight and his father's shoulders slump with worry. He heard the Wu's voices through the walls, no longer laughing, but sharp and urgent. The competition became a sickness. It was Maylin, his mother, who finally confronted them, not with anger, not yet, but with her unbending logic. "This will poison us both," she declared, standing on the path as both families gathered. "There must be a fair way." Old Man Wu, his eyes narrowed, looked at his 3 sons, then at Kailan and his sister. It was Bolan, Kailan's father, who offered the solution. "Let the Wu family take the first term," he said, his voice soft, eager to mend the rift. "You have 3 sons to feed, we have 2 children. It is only right. We will take the second term." The air was thick with silence. Wu Dai, the eldest son, already carrying himself with the air of an official, nodded slowly. "2 years for us," he said, "then 2 years for you. A fair agreement." The men shook hands. A verbal promise. A man's word, in a place where such things were meant to be iron. Maylin watched them, her arms crossed, her trust not so easily given. But she, too, finally nodded. The sickness seemed to pass. The 2 families shared a meal that night to seal the new agreement. Kailan sat at the edge of the gathering, watching. He saw his father smile for the first time in weeks. He saw his mother speaking with Mrs. Wu, their voices almost as warm as before. But Kailan's gaze drifted. It settled on the Wu's second son, Wu Jing. He was a young man, restless and volatile, with eyes that never seemed to settle. The eldest son, Wu Dai, was all ambition. The youngest son, Wu Han, was still just a boy, younger than Kailan. But Wu Jing was different. He was not looking at the men celebrating their new pact. He was not looking at his father or his brothers. He was looking at Kaylin's mother. It was not a normal look. It was not the way neighbors looked at each other. It was not the way his father looked at Malin, which was full of soft history. Wu Jing's gaze was heavy. It was a look that lingered too long, a look that seemed to measure and claim. It was the way a starving man looks at a feast, but darker. It was the way someone looks at something they believe should, by right, be theirs. Malin laughed at something Bolin said, a loud, unguarded sound that filled the small space. As she laughed, Wu Jing's eyes narrowed, just for an instant, his hands clenching at his sides. Kaylin felt a sudden, sharp coldness. He looked down at his own hands. He understood, in a place deeper than words, that he had just seen something terrible. He had seen a secret. His mother, who noticed every broken branch and every coming storm, had not seen it. His father, who understood the language of a quiet life, had not seen it. Only Kaylin. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that this new contract was not the only thing that stood between the two houses. 2 years passed. 2 full cycles of planting and harvesting. For the Zhao family, they were lean years, made bearable only by the promise that was coming due. The verbal agreement, the handshake, the pact that was to restore their footing. Kaylin, now a young man, had learned to read the seasons of his family as well as the seasons of the earth. This was the season of anticipation. His father, Bolin, spoke of it quietly. "This next term will be good," he would murmur, more to himself than to anyone. "We will repair the roof. We will have enough." His hope was a fragile thing, something he cultivated in the face of dwindling supplies. His mother, Malin, was different. Her hope was not fragile. It was a weapon she sharpened daily. She worked with a fierce energy, her eyes often turning to the Wu family's home. "Their 2 years are done," she said, her voice crisp. "Our turn is our turn. A promise is a promise." She said it so often it became a prayer, a statement of fact meant to hold the world in line. But Keelan watched. The Wu family had changed. The contract had been good to them. They were no longer just neighbors, they were a family of growing importance. Wu Dai, the eldest son, had used the new income and his natural arrogance to secure a position, a small but significant role in the local government management office. He began to carry himself not as a farmer, but as an official. Their clothes were better. Their laughter was louder, and it held a new edge of superiority. And Kaylin, the secret observer, continued to watch Wu Jing, the second son. The money had not softened him. It had given his restlessness a harder, more dangerous edge. His unsettling gaze still found Kaylin's mother when she was unaware, and now it was mixed with a new, dismissive pride. The day of the renewal arrived. Kaylin's family waited. No one from the Wu family came to speak to them. There was no discussion of the transition, no polite handing over of the opportunity. A week passed. The silence from the Wu house was heavy, an answer in itself. It was a neighbor, a woman returning from the market, who spoke the words that broke the world. She was speaking to another, not knowing Mylin was nearby. "The Wus are fortunate," the woman said, "to have the contract renewed for another term. Wu Dai is a powerful son to have." Malin froze. The basket in her hand was forgotten. Kaylin, standing beside her, saw the color drain from her face and then return as a dark burning flush. The neighbors saw her, stammered, and hurried away. Malin said nothing. She walked back to their home, her steps measured and heavy. She went inside and stood in the center of the room for a long, silent moment. "Malin?" Bolin asked, seeing her face. "They renewed it," she said. Her voice was not a shout. It was a flat, cold, dangerous thing. "Behind our backs. They renewed it." "No," Bolin said, standing up, his own hope shattering. They must have had to. Perhaps they will share. I will go and speak to Old Man Wu." "You will not," Malin commanded. "I will." She turned and marched out of the house, her body vibrating with a righteous fury. Kaylin followed her, a cold dread settling in his stomach. He had to watch. She did not knock. She strode onto the path in front of the Wu's home and shouted, "Old Man Wu, Wu Dai. Come out here and face me." The Wu family emerged, not one by one, but as a unit. Old Man Wu in the lead, flanked by his 3 sons. They looked annoyed, their prosperity forming a visible shield around them. "What is this barking?" Old Man Wu said, his voice a low growl. "Have you no shame, woman? Shame?" Malin's voice was pure iron. "You speak to me of shame. 2 years. We had an agreement. We had a promise. My family starved while you feasted. And we did it on the back of your word. And now you steal it." Wu Dai, the new official, stepped forward, smoothing his shirt. "Woman, you are hysterical. There was no agreement. There was talk. A bit of neighborly talk, nothing more. Where is your paper? Where is your proof?" "Proof?" Mylin laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "My husband's word. Your father's handshake. Are those nothing here? Are you a family with no honor?" "These are modern times," Wu Dai said, his voice dripping with condescension. "We do not run our affairs on old wives' tales. The contract is ours. We were the stronger bidders. You should look to your own family's failings instead of blaming us for your poverty." "Poverty," she spat. "It is you who are poor. You are poor in spirit. You are poor in honor. You are thieves." Bolin had arrived by now, panting, trying to pull his wife back. "Malin, please, this is not the way. We can speak to the committee." "The committee." Wu Dai laughed, and his brothers joined him. "The committee. I am the committee, you old fool. Who do you think will listen to you?" It was in that moment of her humiliation, as his father tried to pull her away, that Kalen's eyes found Wu Jing. The second son had not spoken. He was just watching. His gaze was fixed on Mylin, and as she struggled against her husband, a small, cruel smile touched Wu Jing's lips. He leaned toward his younger brother, Wu Han, and murmured something, his eyes still locked on Mylin. He was enjoying this. He was enjoying her powerlessness. He was enjoying her fury and her pain. Mylin finally wrenched free from her husband's grasp. She was shaking, her face pale, defeated not by their words, but by the sudden, awful realization of their complete power. She looked at the Wu family, at Old Man Wu, at the sneering Wu Dai, at the watchful Wu Jing. She said nothing. She turned, her back rigid, and walked back to her home. Kalen knew, as he followed in his mother's silent, defeated footsteps, that the pact was not the only thing that had been broken. Something much older, much deeper, had been torn apart. The path between their houses was no longer a connection, it was a divide. And his mother, a woman who had never backed down, had just been shown a new, terrible kind of silence. The silence of the powerless. It would not last. The days that followed were not quiet. They were filled with a new, suffocating silence. The village itself seemed to be holding its breath. The Zhao family ate their meals without speaking. Kalen's father, Bolin, looked defeated, his hands seeming to have forgotten their purpose. But his mother, Malin, was not defeated. She was a storm gathering strength. Her silence was not the silence of the powerless, as Kalen had first thought. It was the silence of a hunter, of a mind calculating, of a fury that was purifying itself into a single hard point of action. She had tried words, she had tried appeals to honor, she had tried the village committee. All had failed. Kalen watched her. He felt a new, adult fear. He knew she would not let it rest. It happened on a hot, heavy afternoon in August. Malin and her children were returning from the river, their arms full of washed clothes. Their path, as it always did, led them directly past the Wu family's home. It was unavoidable, and he was there, Wu Jing, the second son. He was squatting by his family's front door, idle, his arrogance worn like a new set of clothes. He was alone. As Malin approached, he did not move. He just watched her come, that same unsettling, proprietary look in his eyes that Kalen had seen before. Malin, her head held high, intended to walk past. Her face was a mask of cold contempt. She would not give him the satisfaction of her words. But Wu Jing did not want her words. He spoke as she drew level, his voice low, intimate, and carrying a deep, mocking tone meant only for her. "Still walking with your head so high, Malin." She did not stop. She did not look at him. Her pace quickened. Kalen, walking behind her, felt his stomach tighten. Wu Jing's voice followed her, louder this time, cruel and laced with the poison of his obsession. Such a waste. All that fire, for that weak old man. He cannot even protect what is his. It was not just an insult. It was a violation. It was a claim. Malin stopped. The bundle of clothes in her arms was forgotten. She turned, very slowly, to face him. Kalen and his sister froze behind her. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice a low, dangerous vibration. Wu Jing smiled. It was the smile Kalen had seen before, the one of enjoyment at her humiliation. He stood up, slowly, brushing dust from his pants. "You heard me. A woman like you. Wasted." Malin's face was white. This was not about the contract. This was not about money. This was about something else. Something dark and personal that Kalen could only feel but not name. She did what she had done in the transcript. She did the only thing she could. She gathered herself and she spat. A single, sharp act of contempt that landed in the dust at his feet. Wu Jing's smile vanished. "You crazy woman," he hissed. He took a step toward her. Malin did not retreat. She stood her ground, her eyes blazing, and she spat again. This time, it struck him. It landed on his shirt. The air exploded. Wu Jing's hand moved faster than Kalen could follow. A hard, open-handed strike connected with his mother's face. The sound of it was sharp, a crack in the heavy air. Malin staggered back, a hand to her cheek. But she did not fall, she did not cry. A sound of pure animalistic rage tore from her throat, and she lunged at him, her hands clawed, striking at his face, his chest. She was fighting for her dignity, for her honor. Kalen's sister screamed, a high, thin sound of terror, and turned to run to get their father. "Father," she shrieked. "Father, they are hurting her." The doors of both houses burst open at once, as if the sound of the slap had been a signal. Old Man Wu and Wu Dai, the eldest, spilled out of their home, their faces dark with anger. From his own home, Bolin came running, his face a mask of panic. "No," Bolin cried, seeing his wife in a physical struggle with the younger, stronger Wu Jing. It was no longer a confrontation. It was a brawl. Bolin reached for his wife, trying to pull her away. "Malin, stop. It is not worth it." Old Man Wu grabbed Bolin, shoving him back. "Your woman has lost her mind." Wu Dai, the official, tried to seize Malin's arms. It was pure chaos, a tangle of bodies, of shouting, of accusations. It was then that Kalen saw the youngest son, Wu Han, join the fray, moving toward his mother. Malin, in the center of the struggle, her arms pinned by Wu Dai, saw him coming. She twisted with all her strength, breaking free. Bolin, in his panic, had brought a heavy iron bar, a tool from the farm, perhaps as a threat, perhaps in a feeble attempt to defend. He had dropped it in the dirt. Malin's eyes saw it. She dove for it, snatching it up. "Stand back," she screamed, waving it wildly. She was frantic, cornered, defending herself against the three brothers. She swung the bar, and it connected with Wu Han's head. He cried out and stumbled back. "She has hit him." Wu Dai bellowed. It all seemed to happen in a single, terrible moment for Kalen. He saw Old Man Wu's face contort in fury. He heard the patriarch scream the words that would end everything. "Silence that woman." Wu Jing had been waiting for this. He had been waiting for permission. The slap had not been enough. His public humiliation, being spat on, being fought by a woman he craved and despised, had pushed him past reason. He disappeared for a half-second, moving toward his doorway, and returned with a heavy, thick piece of wood. A club. Bolin saw it and lunged for his wife, Malin, but he was too slow. Kalen saw it all. He saw Wu Jing raise the club. He saw the look in his eyes. It was not just anger, it was not just revenge for his brother. It was the same dark, possessive look from the beginning, now twisted into a terrible, final purpose. It was the look of a man destroying something he could never have. He swung the club with all his strength. There was no loud crack, just a heavy, sickening, dull sound. His mother made no sound at all. She did not cry out. She did not gasp. Her body, which had been so full of fire and life, just stopped. She fell to the ground in a heap. The shouting stopped. The struggling stopped. The world stopped. A profound, echoing silence fell over the driveway, broken only by Bolin's desperate, choked cry. Kalen ran forward, past his frozen father, and knelt. His mother was motionless. A dark crimson stain began to spread in the dirt from beneath her head. He saw it on her face, in her nose. He looked up. Wu Jing was standing over them, the club still in his hand, his chest heaving. His face was not one of panic or regret. It was a mask of awful, final satisfaction. The debt was paid. She was, at last, silent. For a long moment, there was only the silence. It was a silence louder than the brawl, heavier than the hot August air. Kalen knelt in the dirt, his hands inches from the crimson stain that was spreading from beneath his mother's hair. She was completely, utterly still. Bolin, his father, was making a sound, a high, thin wail that was not quite human. He staggered toward the Wu family, who stood frozen by their doorway. "A car," Bolin wept, his words shattering. "Call a car, she needs help. Please." The Wu family did not move. Old man Wu's face was stone. Wu Dai, the official, looked at the woman on the ground with a cold, administrative distance. Wu Jing, his chest still heaving, just watched her, his expression unreadable. "Please," Bolin begged again, clutching at old man Wu's arm. Wu Dai stepped forward, his voice void of all emotion. He gestured to his younger brother, Wu Han, who was nursing his head. "She struck my brother," Wu Dai stated, as if reporting a fact. "If a car is to be called, it is for him. Your wife brought this on herself. It is your responsibility." The cruelty of the refusal was absolute. They would not help. They would let her perish in their driveway. That realization broke Bolin's paralysis. He looked at his motionless wife, then at his two frozen children. He turned, and he ran. He ran, stumbling, toward the village head's house, his cries for help echoing back down the path. Kalen did not move. He stayed by his mother, a small, silent guardian. He did not look at her. He looked at Wu Jing. He watched the man who had held the club, and he committed his face, his posture, his silence, to memory. This was the first memory. The village head arrived, followed by a panting, hysterical Bolin. The head was a practical man. He saw Wu Han, standing and conscious. He saw Meilin, motionless and bleeding. "Are you insane?" The head shouted at old man Wu. "Your son is standing. She is not. Call a car now." Forced by the village authority, the Wus finally, begrudgingly, made the call. The wait was an agony. Every second that passed, Kalen watched the lifeblood drain into the dirt. The journey was a blur. A long, jolting ride to a clinic in a town that felt a world away. They sat in a white, sterile room. Hours passed. Kalen said nothing. His father paced, his hands twisting, muttering prayers. Finally, a man in a white coat approached them. He spoke in quiet, respectful tones. Kalen did not hear all the words. He heard only the finality. They had tried. It was too late. She had been pronounced deceased late that night. The clinic was small, the man explained. They did not have the facilities to keep her. They would have to release her body to the family. That night, this was the second memory. The ride back, in the dark, with his father's quiet, broken sobs and the heavy, cold presence of his mother's body. When they arrived back in the village, Bolin was a different man. The grief had burned away his fear, leaving behind a hard, brittle core of Malin's own righteous anger. He did not take her home. With Kalen's silent help, he carried his wife's body from the car. He carried her to the Wu family's driveway, to the exact spot in the dirt where she had fallen. He laid her down. Justice. Bolin screamed at the dark house, his voice raw. "You will not hide. You will look at what you have done. Justice." Villagers, woken by the cries, began to gather. Lights came on. Faces appeared, pale and shocked in the dark. The Wu family's door remained closed. The police were called. They arrived with the dawn, and with them came a man they called a forensic expert. Kalen stood and watched. He had not slept. He had not cried. He just watched. The expert looked at the body. He looked at the crowd. He declared that he would perform his examination right then, right there. No one told the crowd to leave. No one told Kalen to go home. No one offered his mother the privacy of a sheet. This was the third memory. The one that would eclipse all others. He watched the expert shave his mother's hair. He watched him clean her scalp with a towel and hot water. He watched, in the full view of the entire village, as the man used a tool to saw her skull open. He heard the sound it made. He watched the man look inside. He did not flinch. He did not look away. He absorbed every detail of the violation, the final, public degradation of the strong, proud woman who had been his mother. When it was over, the expert stood and spoke to the police, his voice loud in the morning air. The death was caused by blunt force trauma to the head from a heavy wooden instrument. That night, the police arrested 3 members of the Wu family. Old Man Wu, the youngest son Wu Han, and the second son Wu Jing. Kalen watched them be led away. He felt nothing. The fire of his mother's life had been extinguished, and in its place, in the cold, empty space inside him, a new, patient, frozen thing had just been born. The arrest of 3 Wu family members sent a shockwave through the village. For a brief, flickering moment, Kalen's father, Boone, allowed himself to hope. "They have them," he whispered, his hands trembling. "The police, they saw the evidence. They saw your mother. They will do what is right." He clung to this belief in the system, in a world that would naturally seek to balance itself. Kalen said nothing. He had also seen. He had seen the expert's clinical, public violation of his mother. He had seen the faces of the crowd, a mix of horror and spectacle. He had seen the cold, calculating look on Wu Dai's face. He did not share his father's hope. While the Zhao family waited in their house of grief, a different kind of meeting was taking place. The wheels of influence were turning. Wu Dai, the official, was not a man to be idle. He was not in a cell. He was moving, speaking, leveraging every connection his new money and his government title had bought him. The conversation, when it happened, was a simple, brutal calculation. Old Man Wu, his face a mask of cold fury, sat with his eldest and second son. "He is an adult," Wu Dai explained, his voice low and pragmatic, gesturing toward Wu Jing. "For this, they will end his life. The family's future, my future, ends." Wu Jing, the killer, said nothing. He just stared at his hands, the hands that had held the club. But, Wu Dai continued, his eyes turning cold. "There is another way." The youngest son, Wu Han, was brought in. He was a minor. He was terrified. He had a visible injury on his head from where Malin had struck him. He was, in every way, the perfect solution. "Listen to me, boy," Old Man Wu growled, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You will do this for your family." "Father, Wu Han stammered, his eyes wide with fear. "I did not. I was hit, but I did not." "It does not matter what you did," Wu Dai cut him off, his voice like ice. "It matters what we say you did. You were struck. You were enraged. You grabbed the club. You, not your brother, and you defended your father. You did it in a fit of anger. You will confess to this." "But, prison," the boy whispered, tears welling. "A few years," Wu Dai said, waving a dismissive hand. "You are a child. They will be lenient. They will call it intentional harm, not the ending of a life. And you were struck first. Your mother's actions, her actions, will be seen as the cause. When you get out, your brother and I will have built an empire. You will be taken care of for the rest of your life. You will be a hero to this family." The threat was unspoken but clear. If he did not do this, he would be nothing. He would be cast out. Wu Jing was the future. Wu Han was the sacrifice. "You will tell them," Old Man Wu commanded, "that you were defending me. You will tell them you remember nothing after she struck you. Do you understand me?" Wu Han, trapped between his father's command, his older brother's cold logic, and his own terror, could only nod, tears streaming down his face. The next day, the village learned the news. Old Man Wu and Wu Jing were released. Their involvement was a mistake, a misunderstanding. The police now had a full confession. The youngest son, Wu Han, had admitted to everything. "No," Bolan whispered when he heard. "No, it is a lie. It was not the boy. It was the second one. It was Wu Jing. I saw him." "Kalen, you saw him, did you not? Tell them." Kalen just looked at his father. He nodded, once. "Yes," he said, his voice quiet. "I saw him, but he made no move toward the police. He knew it was useless. The lie was already set in stone. The trial was a mockery, a swift, clean procedure designed for one purpose, to close the case." Kalen and his father sat on a wooden bench and watched the performance. They heard the Wu's narrative, spun by a clever lawyer Wu Dai had hired. They heard how Malin was an unstable, aggressive woman. They heard how she had attacked the family unprovoked. And then they heard Wu Han reciting the lines he had been given, his voice trembling, confessing to an act he did not commit, while his brother, the true killer, sat in the back of the room, free. The judge was sympathetic to the boy. He was a minor. He had been provoked. His mother's life was officially deemed a mitigating factor in her own ending. The charge was not a severe one. It was intentional violence resulting in a passing. The sentence was light, almost laughably so. 7 years. Not for the act, but for the impetuousness of youth. Then came the final insult. The compensation. The court ordered the Wu family to pay the Zhaos for their loss. The sum was announced. It was barely enough to cover the cost of the funeral. It was a handful of money, the price the law had placed on his mother's life. That night, Boone took the money. He did not count it. He sat at his table, his head in his hands, and he wept. Not the raw screams of grief, but the silent, hopeless, broken sobs of a man who had lost his wife, his honor, and his faith in the world, all in a single season. Kalen stood in the doorway and watched. He did not cry. He felt nothing but a vast, cold, empty clarity. The Wu family had taken his mother. The law had protected them. The world was not balanced. It was a fraud. He looked at his broken father, and then he looked out the window toward the house of the Wus. The frozen thing inside him, born in the driveway, had now been forged in the courtroom. It had a new name: patience. The debt had not been paid. It had just been compounded, and he would be the one to collect it. In the wake of the trial, the Zhao house became a place of ghosts. Kalen was now a young man, but his youth was over. He had stepped through a door and could not go back. His father, Boone, was a broken man. He moved through the days by rote, tending the small plot of land that was left to him, his hands performing tasks his mind had already abandoned. He spoke little, and when he did, his voice was thin, a mere echo of the man he had been. The fire that his wife, Malin, had possessed, and which he had briefly borrowed in his grief, was gone. He was a hollow vessel, filled only with the dust of his memories. Kalen was different. He was not hollow. He was full. He was filled to the brim with the 3 memories, which played on a constant, silent loop behind his eyes. The driveway, the clinic, the public violation. They were his only teachers now. He returned to his studies, but he was not there. The voices of his classmates, the chatter about small victories and childhood concerns, sounded to him like the noise of a distant world. He sat at his desk, a ghost, his gaze fixed on nothing. He watched the teachers speak, but their words did not penetrate the cold, clear silence in his mind. He completed his middle school obligations, a silent, efficient automaton, and then he stopped. "I will not be going back," he informed his father one evening, his voice flat. Boone, too weary to argue, too broken to ask why, simply nodded. "We need the help," he murmured. So Kalen began to work. He took odd jobs, mending fences, carrying loads, laboring in the fields of neighboring farms. He was strong, and he was, above all, quiet. People hired him because he did the work of 2 men and never spoke. They found his silence unnerving. "The Zhao boy," they would whisper. "He is not right." Damaged by what he saw, they pitied him, and they kept their distance. He was not damaged. He was focused. Years began to pass, layering one upon the other like thin sheets of ice. Kalen's sister, unable to bear the suffocating grief of the house, married young and moved to a distant town, her departure a desperate flight to a life that was not defined by the driveway. It left only Kalen and his father, 2 silent men rattling around in a house that was too empty. And across the path, in the Wu family home, the opposite was happening. Their house was not emptying, it was filling up with prosperity. The 7 years of Wu Han's sentence passed. He returned from his time away, not as a pariah, but as the family's quiet hero. He was changed, more subdued, haunted perhaps by the lie he had lived, but he was provided for. His family, as promised, took care of him. He was given a job, a wife, a life. He had been the sacrifice, and he had been rewarded for it. The Wus flourished. The injustice had not only been forgotten, it had been profitable. Wu Dai's political star had risen. The contract money, which had been the seed of the entire conflict, was now a distant memory, a small kernel that had grown into a forest of influence. He was no longer a minor administrator, he was a respected local official. He had connections, he had power, he had, in the eyes of the village, proven his family's superiority. And Wu Jing, the killer, was the most successful of all. He had left the village shortly after the trial, protected by his brother's new power. He had used the family's influence and his own ruthless nature to start a business in the city. He became a wealthy man. Years had passed when Kalen saw him again. Kalen was mending a stone wall by the side of the road, his hands raw, his clothes covered in dirt. A new, expensive car, black and gleaming, slowed as it navigated the uneven village path. Kalen looked up. Wu Jing was behind the wheel. He looked heavier, softer, his face smooth with the arrogance of success. He did not look at Colin, he did not even see him. To Wu Jing, the man on the side of the road was just part of the landscape, a faceless laborer, an insect. He was on his way to his father's house, a successful son returning for a festival, untouched by the past. Kalen stopped working. He stood very still, his heart not beating faster, but slower, colder. He watched the car until it disappeared. The Wus had everything. They had power, they had money, they had new cars and new lives. They had moved on. Kalen wiped the dirt from his hands. He was still in the driveway. He had never left. He turned back to the wall, picking up another heavy stone. The Wus could have their success. It was just another part of the debt. And he was patient. The sight of the black car and the soft, successful face behind the glass stayed with Kalen for days. It was a splinter in his mind. He was a grown man, and in that moment, seeing Wu Jing's oblivious prosperity, he realized he had been living a lie. He had been lying to his father. He had been lying to himself. After he had finished his work on the stone wall, he had returned home. His father, Boone, was asleep in his chair, a man made old not by time, but by a singular event. Kalen looked at his own hands, calloused and hard from fieldwork. They were strong. But they were not the hands he had intended to have. His father had been watching him with a growing, desperate fear. Boone saw his son's silence, his intense, cold focus. He saw a young man who did not speak of the future, who did not look at women, who did not participate in the life of the village. He saw a man who was, in his own way, still kneeling in the driveway. One evening, his father had sat him down, his hands trembling. Kalen, Boone had pleaded, his voice thin. You must leave this place, this house. It is a grave, and I am afraid of what you are becoming. You are so silent, you are so still. Please, son, for me, for your mother's memory, go, join the army. They can teach you skills, they will give you a future. People respect a soldier. Kalen had looked at his broken father. He had seen the pathetic hope in his eyes, the desire for his son to be anything other than the silent, waiting thing he had become. And so, Kalen had agreed. He had agreed not for a future, but for the training. He had been a model soldier. In a place that valued discipline, Kalen was a prodigy. He rose before the others. He worked harder. He was the fastest, the strongest, the most accurate. His silence, which had been a mark of damage in the village, was seen as focus in the army. His comrades respected him, but they kept their distance. He was not one of them. He was not there for comradeship. His commanders praised him. They saw in him a perfect soldier, but one without the usual ambition. He did not seek promotion. He only sought the training. He learned how to handle himself. He learned how to be efficient. He learned how to endure. He forged his body into an instrument of perfect, patient obedience. After a year of this, his commanding officer had called him in. He was an older man, with eyes that had seen too many young, angry men pass through his barracks. Zhao, the commander said, his hands steepled on his desk, your record is immaculate. Your performance is, frankly, remarkable. But you are not here for the army. Kalen stood at perfect attention. Sir, I see hundreds of young men. They join for patriotism, for a steady meal, for an escape, the commander continued, his voice quiet. They have a fire in them. Your fire is different. It is a cold fire, Zhao. It is not ambition. It is something else. What brought you here? The question hung in the air. It was the first time in many years anyone had asked him a real question. Kalen's posture did not change, but he met the commander's gaze. Sir, he said, his voice clear, I joined to train myself. To train for what? To seek justice, sir, for my mother. The commander did not flinch. He nodded, slowly, as if a suspicion had been confirmed. He sighed, a long, heavy sound. I read your enlistment file. I know what happened in your village. A terrible thing, a failure of our system. He leaned forward. Let me tell you something, soldier. I have seen men consumed by this. This need for their own justice. It is a poison. It eats you from the inside out, and in the end, it destroys the very thing you are trying to honor. It never ends well. Kalen's expression remained unchanged. You want revenge, the commander said, not as a question, but as a statement. I understand it. But the best revenge, the only revenge that matters, is not this. The best revenge is to live well. To take this discipline, this strength, and build a life. To be successful, to have a family. To prove that they did not break you. That is how you honor your mother. By living a life she would be proud of. Kalen had listened. He had nodded. Yes, sir, he had said. He served his 2 years. He had taken the commander's words to heart. He had tried. The memory dissolved. He was a grown man, standing in his silent, empty house, looking at his father's grieving slumber. He had come back from the army. He had tried to live well. He had worked in the fields. He had broken stones by the side of the road. And Wu Jing, the killer, drove a new, expensive car, his face soft with success, without a memory, without a care. In that moment, Kylan knew with absolute certainty that the commander, in all his wisdom, had been wrong. Living well was not revenge. It was a distraction. It was a form of surrender. The army had given him the skills. The sight of Wu Jing had given him back his clarity. The debt was still outstanding, and it was time to prepare to collect it. The vision of Wu Jing's soft, successful face was a breaking point. Kalen knew he could no longer stay. To remain in the village, to work the fields and mend the walls was a form of acceptance. It was an agreement to the terms of their new reality. The Wus had won and the Jas had been forgotten. He could not breathe the same air as that acceptance. The commander's advice about living well now felt like a cruel joke, a philosophy for men who had never been forced to watch their mother's skull opened in the public dirt. He made his decision that night. He did not announce it. He simply packed his few possessions into a small bag. His father, Bolin, watched him from the doorway of his room, his face etched with a new, familiar dread. You are leaving, Bolin stated. It was not a question. I cannot stay here, Kalen replied, his voice flat. He did not look at his father. He could not bear to see the man's complete and total defeat. Where will you go? His father whispered, the words barely audible. The world is large. You will be alone. I am already alone, Kalen said, the words hanging in the small, cold house. He did not say we, he said I. He had separated himself from his father's grief, which felt to him like a warm, wet blanket of surrender. His own grief was cold, hard, and sharp. He left the next morning. He had a small amount of money saved from his work and the discipline the army had given him. He did not look back. His departure was the final blow for Bolin. His daughter was gone, married into another life, and now his son, his silent, watchful son, had been consumed by the world. He was truly, finally, the last occupant of the House of Sorrow. He spent the first weeks in a fog, a man walking in his own grave. The house was no longer a home. It was a memorial, a cold box that held only the echoes of his wife's voice and the sight of his son's back as he walked away. And next door, the Wu family thrived. He heard their laughter during the festivals. He saw the expensive gifts they brought for Old Man Wu. The sight of their prosperity, the sound of their life, was a constant, grinding torture. One morning, Bolin awoke with a new, frantic thought. It was a thought born of pure, unadulterated desperation. A last spark in a man who was otherwise ash. Why had Kylan left? Because the house was a tomb. Because it was small and dark and full of memories of what he had lost. It was not a place to build a new life. A new purpose seized Bolin, a reason to rise, a project that would consume his every waking moment. He would not let his son drift forever. He would build a reason for him to return. He went to the small bank and took out the last of his meager savings. He began to work. His project was a monument to his irrational hope. He began to build a second story onto their small, sad house. The rest of the village watched him, first with curiosity, then with pity. They saw the grieving widower, alone, laboring from sunup to sundown. He learned to mix cement. He learned to lay bricks. His soft farmer's hands became ruined, cracked and bleeding, but he did not stop. He was building a future. He was building a marriage home. He would make it beautiful. He would add new, bright rooms. He would build a space for a wife, for grandchildren. He would build a house so full of new life that it would finally, physically, smother the terrible memories that lived on the ground floor. He would build up. This was his new obsession. Every penny he earned went into wood, or nails, or plaster. He worked until his body collapsed, and he would rise the next day and do it again. And far away, his son was doing the same. Kalen moved from town to town, taking the hardest jobs he could find. He worked on construction sites. He loaded cargo. He was a ghost, a silent, powerful worker who never spoke, never smiled, and never stayed. He, too, saved every penny. But his purpose was the opposite of his father's. Boone was building a house of hope. Kalen was building a treasury of patience. He would send money home, small amounts, but regular. He sent it not out of love, but out of a cold sense of duty. Boone, receiving the money, took it as a sign. He wept with gratitude. He thought, "My son is successful. He is saving for his return." The money gave him new energy. It gave him proof that his dream was real. He poured Kalen's dutiful offerings into the walls of the rising second floor, a house built by two men, separated by a chasm of purpose, both haunted by the same woman. Years bled into one another, turning from a sharp, immediate pain into a dull, chronic ache. Kalen drifted. He was a man in his 30s, a ghost who saved every coin but never built a life. He worked on docks, in kitchens, on construction sites, a silent, powerful machine. He even left the country for a time, ending up in a foreign land, trying to outrun the memories. But they were not in the village, they were in him. And back in Hepping village, his father, Boone, grew old. The second story of the house was completed. It was beautiful. He painted the rooms. He bought new furniture, pieces he could not afford, all with the money Kalen dutifully sent home. He had built his shrine to a future that would never arrive, a beautiful, hollow monument. In the year 2017, Kalen was 35 years old. 22 years had passed since the driveway. He had been drifting, working a job in another town, when he heard the familiar sounds of celebration. It was December. The new year was approaching. A thought, cold and clear, entered his mind. Chinese New Year. The one time of year when all families, even the successful ones, return to their ancestral homes. The one time of year when the wuss would be gathered. He had waited 2 decades. He had tried the commander's way. He had tried to live well. It was a lie. There was only one truth, and it lived in the 3 memories. He quit his job that day. He emptied his bank account. The gathering was coming, and this year he would be attending. Kalen arrived in Hepping village a few days before the new year. He did not go home. Not yet. He walked the old paths, a stranger in the only place that had ever mattered. He saw children, the grandchildren of his old neighbors, setting off small fireworks. He smiled at them, a ghost remembering his own stolen boyhood. Then he walked to the house. Boone was an old man. When he opened the door and saw his son, he did not speak. He just reached out a trembling hand as if to touch an apparition. Then he wept, pulling Kalen inside. "You are home," Boone cried. "You are home for the new year." The reunion was heavy with unspoken words. Boone, with a desperate, pathetic pride, showed Kalen the second floor. "Look," he said, his voice bright with false hope. "All for you, for your future. For your wife, when you find her, it is a good house, a new house." Kalen looked at the clean, empty, beautifully furnished rooms. He saw his father's entire life wasted on this monument to a lie. The sorrow he felt was so profound it was almost a physical weight. That night, his sister arrived with her own family. She saw Kalen, and she, too, cried, holding him as if he were a ghost. They sat for a final family meal. It was the first time in over 2 decades they had all been together. His sister spoke of her children. His father spoke of his hopes for the house. Kalen said little. He waited until they were finished. Then he took a thick, heavy envelope from his bag and placed it on the table. "What is this?" Boone asked, confused. "It is for you," Kalen said, his voice quiet. "It is all my savings." "It is for your retirement, father. You have worked hard enough." Bolin tried to refuse, but Kalin was insistent. "Take it. Renovate the rest. Live well." His father, weeping with gratitude, took the envelope, thinking it was a son's gift. He did not understand it was a final severance. Kalin went to his old room. He unpacked his small bag. In it was the money for his father, a change of clothes, and a new, carefully wrapped implement he had purchased in the city. He was home. Chinese New Year's Day was cold and clear. The village was alive with the sound of distant fireworks and the smell of cooking. Bolin, his spirits higher than they had been in 22 years, woke early. "I am going to the mountain," he announced cheerfully, "to visit your mother's grave, to tell her the good news, that you are home." "You go ahead, father," Kalin said. "I am busy with something. I will join you later." Bolin nodded, full of joy, and left the house. Kalin did not get busy. He went to the window, and he watched. He waited. He was a statue of patience. He knew the Wus were home. He had seen their expensive cars, symbols of their untouchable success. He did not have to wait long. He saw movement. The door of the Wu house opened. Two men emerged, dressed for the festival. He recognized them instantly. Wu Dai, the official, his face soft with authority, and Wu Han, the scapegoat, the younger brother who had taken the fall and been rewarded for his silence. They were laughing, heading to the mountain path, just as his father had, to visit their own ancestral graves. Kalin covered his face, put on his cap, and checked the implement in his bag. He slipped out the back door and followed them from a distance, keeping to the quiet paths he knew as a boy. He knew where they were going, he knew the path, and he knew a secluded spot where no one would see. He pounced. He was a phantom, emerging from the cold air. Wu Han did not even register what was happening before the act was done. Wu Dai, the official, turned, his mouth open to make a sound. He froze. He recognized the eyes. They were the last thing he ever saw. Kalin left them there, on the cold ground. He had waited 22 years. He did not feel anger. He did not feel joy. He felt only the satisfying click of a lock, a piece falling into place. Two were done. He walked down from the mountain. He did not run. He walked with the same methodical purpose that had defined his life. He was stained, but he did not care. He walked directly to the Wu family house, ignoring the villagers who were beginning their celebrations. He did not knock. He kicked the front door open. In the kitchen, Old Man Wu was busy. He was preparing the grand New Year feast, a patriarch surrounded by the rewards of his corruption. He looked up, his face contorting in anger at the intrusion. "Who are you?" he bellowed, raising a kitchen tool. Kalin stepped into the light. The old man's face went from anger to confusion, and then to a dawning, mortal terror as he recognized the face. He recognized the eyes of Malin. He opened his mouth to shout for his wife, for his remaining son. Kalin was swift. The act was finished. The patriarch fell among the preparations for his feast. He heard a shuffling sound. The elderly Mrs. Wu, her sight and hearing failing her, entered the room, leaning on a cane. She was confused by the noise, by the silence of her husband. "What is going on?" she asked, her voice thin and reedy. "What is that? What did you do?" She squinted at Kalin, at the stain on his clothes, at her husband on the floor. Kalin looked at the old woman. She was just a confused, frail thing, a witness but not a participant. He thought of his own mother. "You are a woman," he said, his voice flat. "I will not harm you today." He turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her alone with the silence and the uneaten feast. He walked out of the Wu house, back into the cold light of day. He was finished. The debt was paid. He stood in the Wu family driveway. He looked down at the packed dirt. He knew, instinctively, where he was. He was standing on the exact spot, the patch of earth that had held his mother's body, the place where he had made his silent, youthful vow. The place of the three memories. He looked up. Sitting by the house, arrogant and gleaming, was the expensive black car. The one he had seen years ago. The one belonging to Wu Dai. It was the symbol of their victory, the proof that their corruption had led to success. It was the final insult. He walked to the car. He had just taken the lives of 3 men, and now he would take their pride. He lit the car on fire. The flames caught quickly, greedily. Black smoke billowed into the festive air. Kalen did not move. He stood in the driveway in front of the burning pyre and he watched. Villagers, drawn by the smoke and the smell, began to emerge. They saw the fire. They saw the open door of the Wu house. And they saw the solitary stained figure of Kalen Zhao standing in the driveway, watching it burn. He heard a villager whisper his name, a gasp of shocked recognition. He turned his head and looked at them, his face calm. "I finally did it," he muttered, to himself and to the world. "I finally got my revenge." He did not run. The need for patience was gone. The need for secrecy was gone. The cold, coiled thing inside him had finally unwound. As the village descended into chaos, as the first screams came from the Wu house, as someone shouted about the bodies on the mountain, Kalen just walked away. He had no plan. He had only a strange, profound sense of peace. The poison that had circulated in his blood for 22 years, the poison of hatred and injustice, was gone. He felt light. He spent 2 days walking. He walked past the lake where he had played as a small boy before the world had broken. He walked along the river. As he walked, he took the implement he had used and threw it, as far as he could, into the deep, moving water. A final offering. That night, he wanted to see the fireworks. He had not truly seen them since he was a child. He sat on a cold patch of grass and watched the bright, meaningless explosions in the sky. He felt a calm so deep it was almost sleep. He slept for the first time in his adult life without the 3 memories playing behind his eyes. He slept by an automated teller machine, a ghost in the modern world. The next morning, he was hungry. He bought some food. He kept walking. His feet were sore, but he did not mind. He thought about going back to see his father, to explain, but he knew, when he heard people talking, that the police were there. He could not go home. Instead, he walked to the mountain. He walked up the path, past the place where his reckoning had begun. He walked to the grave he had not visited since he was a boy, his mother's grave. He knelt in the cold dirt. He put his hand on the simple stone. He did not cry. He just spoke, his voice quiet in the wind. "Mother," he said, "I did it. I got my revenge for you. It is finished." He knelt there for a long time. He felt the last vestiges of his 22-year burden lift from his shoulders. He was empty, and he was at peace. He stood up, brushed the dirt from his knees, and walked down the mountain. He walked directly to the new police station in the center of the village and turned himself in. The trial was a national sensation. It was not a question of guilt. Kalen admitted to everything, his confession detailed, calm, and absolute. He hid nothing. He told them about the driveway. He told them about the public autopsy. He told them about the scapegoat. It was revenge, he stated, not as an excuse, but as a reason, as clear and simple as a fact of nature. The prosecution, faced with a confession, tried to control the narrative. They argued, just as the original file suggested, that this was not about justice. This was about a social failure. A man who was 35, unmarried, with no job, who was simply jealous of the Woos' success. This was the only time Kalen showed anger. He stood in the court and refuted them. "They are twisting it," he said, his voice loud for the first time. "They are using my honesty against me. They said I was unhappy with my life. So many people are unhappy with their lives. Do they do this? No, it was not for money. It was not for jealousy. It was for my mother." The public agreed with him. The live stream of the trial had millions of viewers. He was not a monster. He was a hero. He was the product of a broken system, a man who had done what the law had failed to do. The judge did not see a hero. The judge saw a man who had, in a cold, premeditated fashion, taken 3 lives. The law, which had failed Milan so completely, would not fail the Wus. The sentence was announced, death. Kalen listened, and he nodded, once. He had known this was the price. He had factored it into his calculations 22 years ago. The last time Boone saw his son, it was through a piece of glass. His father was destroyed, a man who had lost his wife to injustice and would now lose his son to justice. "They will test you," Boone wept, talking of appeals, of money, of hope. Kalen put his hand to the glass. "Dad," he said, his voice gentle for the first time. "It's okay. Don't be stupid. Don't spend your money. Use the money I gave you. Live." His execution was carried out quickly. After it was done, the authorities called Bolin Zhao to collect his son's ashes. The old man, who had lost everything, had one last act of defiance left in him. "I will not collect them," he told the official, his voice a cold, hard echo of his wife's. "The case was unjust. The verdict was unfair. You keep him. Throw his ashes in the river. Let him travel the world. My son is not dead, because I do not accept this." His son's friends, soldiers from his old unit who had read the story, eventually collected the ashes and brought them to Bolin. He took them to the mountain and buried them near his wife, with no ceremony, no funeral. Bolin lived the rest of his days as a ghost, an old man in a big, two-story house. He never went upstairs. He would sit on the ground floor, in the dark, surrounded by the beautiful, empty, hopeful rooms of a future that had been built on a foundation of sorrow and had never, ever been possible. Thank you for following this story to its conclusion. It is a heavy one, a story that asks more questions than it answers, about justice, about revenge, and about the price of both. I'm glad we could explore it together. I'll see you next time.